and welcome to Frankie Sense and more. I forget which day it is. Is it Mission Unstoppable? Is it Frankie Sense? Whatever day it is, it's snowing here. So it's cold and it's snowing, and I'd rather be where my guest is in Florida, I think. But let me introduce him to you. He's a fascinating gentleman. Before he was, before he was Monk Yun Rou, he was Arthur Rosenfeld, born into a prominent New York family. Arthur received his academic background at Yale and Cornell and the University of California before he was ordained a Taoist monk in Canton, China in 2012. He's held many titles: renowned Tai Chi master, author, novelist, TV writer, PBS host of a series Longevity, Tai Chi. He's the author of 15 books, including the one we're going to discuss today, Monk Manifesto, a prescription for evolution, revolution, and global awakening. His formal martial arts training began in 1980, and he studied with some of China's top Tai Chi grandmasters. And in 2011, he was named Tai Chi Master of the Year at the World Congress on Qigong and Traditional Chinese Medicine. Monk's accomplishments go on, and I will post his full bio on the Good Radio Network site, but I prefer to hear about the man from the monk himself. Let's meet him. Welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
It is, absolutely a delight. Do you mind if I just read a little bit from your book? I think I want to set the tone here for a second, if that's okay with you.
Please do.
Thank you. You hold in your hands a manifesto for change, an 11th hour emergency survival manual, utterly devoid of bright future reassurances and new age pabulum. You will find nothing here about how thinking positive thoughts will help you look great in tight jeans, how brilliant your children are, how the whales really love us for killing them, or how the work that you do in your high-salaried corporate position is critical to the survival of the universe. Although I hope you will find my words as spiritual as they are political, I'm no Pollyanna. I don't believe that all will soon be right with the world or that we are almost through the tough times. I don't accept social media as a substitute for reality, or that are evolving into half-digital cyborgs will take away all our pain. I believe in the transformative power of both meditation and love, but don't believe either or both will solve all of our problems. I'm a monk, not a carnival barker, and thus skeptical of quick and easy fixes. Thus, I hope that you will find the ones I offer in the chapters that follow to be substantial, meaningful, worthwhile, and even though they may require some effort. Wow. You're a shit disturber.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah. I mean, how else do you change it?
A bold agitator par excellence.
There you go. Yeah. Wow. Those are heavy words. Not something you expect from a monk, but, like slap you in the face, go, hey, wake up. Wake up.
So, there is actually a long tradition of monks in a variety of different disciplines and traditions being politically active and being even activists. And you have only to look at our most famous monk on planet Earth right now, the Dalai Lama, to see that there are plenty of monks who are out there in the world, trying to make a difference with people and with situations. So the monk that, retreats to the mountain and communes with nature is, one kind of monk. And believe me, there are not a day goes by I wish I were not one of them, but maybe not an hour goes by. but we don't all do that.
Yeah. How did you get your name? Do you pick it, or do they pick it for you?
I was hoping for something like Thunder Fist or Titanium Manhood or something.
Well, I'm Titanium Woman.
But when I first received this name, and I was told that it meant soft cloud. My Mandarin is mostly useless. I hear the tones and I speak enough to get around in a taxi and stuff. But when it comes to literary pursuits, some of my books have been translated into Mandarin, but I'm not a great Mandarin speaker. I wish I were better. But when I learned that it meant soft cloud, I was at first a bit chagrined, and my master said, well, he was watching my expression. And he said, it's a very important Taoist name. After all, the clouds float, you go with the flow, everything is light and easy. And I guess I must have looked unconvinced. And he said, well, you know, clouds also bring rain, you know, sustenance, and they can be weighty and, you know, weigh more than elephants. And I said, uh-huh. And he said, and of course, when necessary, they can produce thunder and lightning and hail.
And you're like,
So,
yeah.
because I have a defective personality, I thought, yeah, okay. But since those initial moments, I have, of course, come to very much appreciate this name and love it very much.
And I would think that in the Taoist tradition, which I know absolutely nothing about, that you shouldn't have any thought about your name, really, should you? It should just be,
Actually, you know, one of the great Taoist exhortations or admonitions is to be nameless. So, for example, in one of our greatest texts, and the one that is most well known to Western people, the Tao Te Ching, which is the book of the way and its power, which, by the way, parenthetically, is the second most widely translated book in the world after the Abrahamic Bible, or at least so I'm told. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say. Anyway, it's very popular, and I have 60-odd translations of it on the shelves next to me here. But in that book, there is a description. It's only 5,000 Chinese characters, so it's a little tiny book. And each one of its 81 stanzas is very precious. And by that I mean precious, it's valuable, not precious in the slight kind of way. And one of those stanzas is about leadership. And it says that I paraphrase here, the worst leader is the one that everybody fears. And slightly better than that is the one that everyone hates. And slightly better than that is the one that everybody likes well enough. And slightly better than that is the one whom everybody loves. But the best leader of all is the one nobody knows. Not only do they not know his or her name, but they don't even know that person exists. In other words, a country is proceeding, infrastructure is being built and maintained, events are unfolding, services are provided, defense is provided, all the things that make a country coherent and valuable to people. All those things are happening, but they're happening in such a way that the individual citizens believe that it's their own doing. They don't know that there is a captain at the helm of the ship. They just think that
it runs itself.
Runs itself because they're all so great, you know.
Yeah. That's I like that a lot, and it's very apropos for right today.
Yes.
I'm going to read a little something else here, because you do turn a good phrase. Let me just do this. I begin with such straightforward urgency because our floating home, zooming through the galaxy at high velocity inside the wild, spiraling solar system that contains it, has become a watery blue purgatory. More slaughterhouse than paradise, more frenzied, a violent battlefield than garden of enlightenment, more cesspool of fractiousness than temple to unity. Our beautiful planet is dying, and we are its murderers. We're terrible stewards. We're terrible stewards.
Not stewards at all, sadly.
Yeah, well, we used to be. Some people are, I think, but murderers. It's apropos. It's apropos, and it's scary, and it's sad, and it's frustrating, and it makes me angry. And my spiritual teacher tells me to let it go, because if I think on it, then I bring more of it to the world. You say,
so
slap them up.
The way the book is organized follows the way Taoist thinking obtains. And that means that it's sort of like dropping a stone into a pond and watching the ripples expand. And the stone is the individual reader, and the work that we do, on ourselves. So, it's one thing to be upset with the way things are, to nod your head and say, yeah, we have a problem.
Yeah.
It's another to actually do something. And, for me, the doing something was writing this book and having talks like this. right? This is how I make a contribution because I'm not out there, feeding the elephants or hugging the trees or whatever. So one thing we could say is that if we follow that stone and we follow its ripples, the outermost ones in my book and the ones that, are the ripple, is the ripple that you're talking about right now, which is our environment, our world. And the bottom line is, if we don't have a place to live,
yeah.
And this is a human-centric statement, and I'm not generally human-centric in the book, but I will be for this moment. From a human-centric point of view, if we don't have a place to live, then all of the rest of what we worry about is moot. So what religion we believe in, what God is between our ears, what color our skin is, what nation we belong to, what borders we recognize, what political affiliations we have, all this kind of stuff, including what art we love and what music we listen to, and on and on and on. All of that doesn't mean anything at all, not even a little bit, if we cannot have a place to live, if we don't survive as a species and take care of our home. And it's that simple. It is the largest issue that is facing us right now in the world, and everything else pales by comparison. Even Mr. Trump.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're out here talking about it, because I know from my own experience, there's not a lot of readers. Well, maybe there are a few readers. You sold a lot of books, but I read every book that comes in. I read multiple books every week, and I ask people, did you read? Have you read? Do you read? Nobody reads. And so let us explain to you what's in this book so that you can understand it in layman terms very easily, because obviously I'm a layman. The book starts off, we have a big problem. The problem is me. It's you. It's I. And I has to change myself first. That's where you start. Let's talk about where you start with yourself.
So there is a porosity to human beings that Western philosophies and religions don't acknowledge. And this porosity is the quintessence of Taoism, particularly when you apply Taoism to issues of conservation and the world, the material world, nature. So the idea that each one of us, is separate not only from each other, which is a bad enough idea, but is separate from nature with a capital N, is a strange and constructed idea that comes largely from, in our Western traditions, in our Middle Eastern roots, inventing gods and then making special relationships with them, and then being given the earth as our playground and our sandbox and our toilet. And so there are lots of things we can say about the conservation side of it, and we have been talking a little bit, but on the human and individual side, which is what you asked me, the problem is that this kind of alienation, this kind of separateness, this kind of sense that I am one person, there's another person, that there is me and there is the world outside of me that is not me. This notion reaches its zenith, and I mentioned this at some point in the manifesto, in science fiction movies and books where we become, in our evolution, a disembodied brain floating in some bubbling blue liquid. I think it was a Star Trek or a Star Wars episode or something I remember from childhood. But, and now free of the constraints and miseries of the flesh, we can zoom through the galaxy, on brain power alone and so on. This is an appealing idea because so often the flesh, particularly the way we regard our physical selves, is a source of suffering to us. But this is not the Taoist way. The Taoist way is to say, look, I don't exist at all as a separate individual. In fact, more than that, more than half of the cells in our body, and I can't remember if the latest reading that I made in this subject is that it is 48% of our cells are not human, or 52% are not human. But anyway, let's say that half the cells in our body do not carry our DNA. They are not us. They are not Frankie, and they are not Yun Rou. So What they are is parasites and viruses and bacteria and worms and protozoans and fungi and on and on and on. And they're things that are conspiring with our cells, following the dicta of our DNA, to create this experience of you and of me in the world. But this is completely an illusion. So if we start at the actual fact that we aren't at all what we think we are, we begin the process of rectification, which I talk about as the first section of my book, which is just a word that means fixing ourselves. And for those folks who are offended by the notion that we should have to fix ourselves, let me say that here I mean fix in a kind way, not a judgmental way. I mean address the things that cause us suffering as individuals and create suffering in the world around us.
It's a heady notion, and it's one that, I think is so necessary. And I love in the book you talk about how because we live in cities and we forget to go out into nature, we forget to even take alone time. And so much of, what we learn about ourselves and know on a more spiritual level is when we spend time by ourselves. It doesn't have to be in meditation, but it could be walking, through the park or walking in a field or whatever. But we are so inundated with people around us that we can't even think. We just can't even think. And sometimes you pick up so many other people's thoughts, you don't even know what's yours.
So two things, one about the heady notion and one about the nature. So regarding nature, remember that the ideas of science and religion and the concept of nature, none of this actually exists. Right? These are all, people like Stephen Jay Gould, who made such a big business, the Harvard anthropologist, I think he was, who made such a big business of separating science and nature and saying, science and religion, and saying religion is good for certain questions, science is good for other questions. These are an attractive notion for a culture that likes to put things in boxes. But remember, all of these things are just human inquiry. So they're just facets of human inquiry. They don't have any fundamental difference, nor do we have any fundamental difference from what we call nature, as I just identified. So regarding the heady notion, let me say that if there is one persistent reaction, I don't know if I wanted to call it a criticism, but it's a reaction to the Monk Manifesto, it is that this is just too much of a utopian tract or screed, that the ideas herein are too much for us to actually do. These things that I ask and suggest and require in order for us to survive and to awaken are too much for the average person whose life is comprised of making it to work or to school or taking care of the kids or taking care of the dog or cleaning the kitchen or cleaning the toilet or making sure the roof isn't leaking and the bills are paid. And obviously I get this. I get it very keenly. However, I think that the role of this work, the role of the book and the role that I have these days in the world is to present these notions as a target at which to aim the arrow of our life. We don't have to hit it all the time. But if you don't have a target, you got nothing to shoot at. You got nothing to aim at, you got nothing to go for. So fair enough, it's a utopian thing, and fair enough, carry it around in your book bag or your hip pocket or your briefcase or leave it on your desk or by your bed and refer to it when you need to be reminded of where we should be going and how we should be living.
It absolutely blows my mind that there's a person like Trump walking around who says that climate change doesn't exist, who's a big denier of the things that we're talking about right now. And it's so, as a parent, as a grandparent, I fear for my grandchildren's and my great-grandchildren's future. Maybe you won't even get that far, I don't know. You talk about this idea of the sixth extinction coming, and anybody who doesn't believe that's true, I think needs to I don't know, get slapped upside their head or something. I certainly, I mean, the signs are there. The signs are there. Look at how horrible we are. We are horrible. We're horrible.
So a few things. First, I just, in my last soliloquy a moment ago, I used the word should. And I think that most people would rather I use the word could. But there are certain gritty realities that really demand the should word, even though we should not should on ourselves, as I say in the book in reference to a psychologist who came up with that phrase years ago. So the realities of, first of all, Mr. Trump, there is something in us here in the United States, some level of frustration that needs some level of disconnection, disaffection, alienation that needs to be addressed. And it is human nature, I'm sorry to say, in addition to being more or less a cancer on the face of the planet, destroying everything, creating toxins that pollute the rivers and the oceans, and acting just like a cancer acts in our bodies, but on the superorganism of Earth. There is another human trait, which is that, sometimes when we get upset, we kick the dog. And this is not our best moment, right? It's not the dog's fault. And so too, this affection, this alienation, this pain we feel as a culture right now is primarily a result of where the culture has taken us based on greed. So the digital universe in which we are now communicating offers a place where we can try to find the recognition and the acknowledgement and sometimes the numbing that we used to get from other things before, like drinking booze or smoking weed or whatever, before this option came along. So many of us are disenfranchised and don't know what to do with our lives. So many of our basic biological needs for touch, for emotional intimacy, for recognition, for validation, for a social structure, all these things are going away. And so in our need, we do dumb things like spend all day playing video games, or have virtual sex in an increasingly realistic environment. I'm told that soon we'll have, that will be indistinguishable maybe from the real thing. We make these decisions to do that instead of being in the real world, not because we're bad people, but because so much is missing and lacking for us. So when it comes to electing somebody like Trump, this is just one more expression of kicking the dog. It's just like feeling this sense of frustration at so much, and so we're just going to make a nihilistic move like electing somebody like that. As far as his ideas about climate change, even his own administration just last week, at the time of this recording, put out, a dire warning from his own people, and he released it on Black Friday so people wouldn't notice it. Really, we're too busy shopping, and spent time sort of hemming and hawing and denying most of what his own people came up with. So there is no denying anything about climate change and about the rape of planet Earth anymore. It's just there's no. Denying is no longer an option.
You wrote about your uncle in the book, and he said he didn't want to live in a world where JFK was shot. And I kind of feel like I don't want to live in a world where Trump is president. But I'm not, I don't. But I'll be here next week.
Lucky girl. Well, look, the point, of course, is that, JFK being shot was not a revocable happenstance. That was done.
Yeah.
Trump being elected,
But what Trump means to me is that we no longer have, and I'm a coach. The very first thing I talk to people as a coach is, what are your values? What do you value? And most people don't know what their values are. But you know what? What has happened to morality? What has happened to decency? What has happened to kindness? What has happened to generosity? What has happened to just doing the right thing and knowing what the right thing is and being a human being, like being a compassionate, beautiful human being? Where did that go? Where did those values go that say, I can lie and I can cheat and I can steal and I can fornicate and I can do everything that I want to do. And that's with impunity. And isn't that grand? And everybody's going, yay, good for you.
So the uncle that you reference, whom I write about in the book, was the governor of New York at one time and the senator from New York, Herbert Lehman. And he was also JFK's trusted confidant. And so I think actually he died when I was a little boy, but he made a big impression on me, as you might imagine, in our family. And I think often about things he said to me and how very great the contrast is between his view of politics and being a politician was and what we see today. He told me once that, remember, being a politician means you have to act according to the highest possible ethical standard, because not only are you being watched and judged, but you are setting the tone for our culture and society. And as you do, so will others do. And so, that is absolutely diametrically opposed to the way America is now, which is no longer a land of ideas and ideals, but a supermarket. You can buy what you want, have what you want. We export the material world and that value and that worldview abroad, and we live it here. And everything is greed and materialism to the point where we are churning through the stuff of planet Earth and ingesting it and then excreting it somehow. So we take things out of the earth, we make them into something, we use them up, and then we dump them back into the earth. And we're sort of terraforming from nature and plants and trees and soil and animals to plastic in dumps. And we're changing, the top crust of our planet from one thing, we're forming it into something else. And this is, from a global perspective, exactly what we do. And if aliens were to come and visit us, and maybe they already have, what they would see is, we are a cow factory and a plastic factory. That's what this planet does. It takes organic things and turns them into plastic.
There's enough tchotchkes. There's enough.
On which we choke and die.
Yeah. And, you talk about in the book, time to get rid of your stuff. And I think as you get older, because, my husband and I, we talk about it all the time, let's get rid of our stuff. There's too much stuff. We got too much stuff. Like, let's just get rid of it. Where do you get rid of it that it doesn't hurt the earth? This is kind of the issue. We don't need to keep making stuff. You go to Disneyland and buy little trinkets, and you go here, you go there, and you buy memorabilia that you never look at or touch again, and it goes into a landfill, and eventually ends up in the ocean, and the turtles and there's all of the sea worlds are choking on this plastic, and we're eating that plastic because they eat it and we eat them, and it comes inside us, and yeah, it's a horrific cycle, really. We don't need the stuff. So your tenet is about simplicity. Let's make life very simple. What were the 3 tenets on Taoism? It was, I'm sorry, I wrote it down, but I can't find it quickly.
So I'll get to them in 1 second. Okay. But let me just address your comments about stuff. First, you said, what do we do with things and where do we put them?
You said to give it to somebody else.
Well, there is a great inequality in the world.
There is.
And that inequality materially is a burgeoning and corrosive problem. So, there are really great charitable things to do with your stuff, and as opposed to, dump them or landfill them. And most of the stuff that we have is reusable, and it continues to have value to somebody in some circumstance somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so, although it is not a final solution to the conundrum that you're pointing out, it is an answer to the question, what do you do with your stuff right now, which is to give it away to those who need it and whose lives will benefit by having it. As far as simplicity goes, this ties together with the stuff thing, because remember, every time you buy something, you are the idea of consuming is what I identified before as sort of eating the world and excreting it, right? So we're putting something in and pushing something out. This means we have some kind of emotional hole that cannot be filled by anything we are doing in our material life. And yet we don't have the resource, the insight, or the inclination to find the answer in the non-material world. So, in our spiritual or inner life. So we continue to just desperately try to fill the hole with more stuff. That's why shopping feels good, for the first 10 minutes. And then when you get home, you realize, oh my God, what did I do? What am I going to do with all? What am I going to put all this stuff? And then later, when you get the credit card bill for it, you rue it even more. So there's this emotional pain that I referenced earlier, and it comes from multiple things in our culture. But this is not a human problem. I just want to make clear. It doesn't have to be a human problem. This is not the way we are wired. There are plenty of human cultures, and there are plenty of Aboriginal cultures which don't have this problem. They understand how to live in balance with their environment, and they don't have this mad, wild, acquisitive urge that cannot be sated. So the three treasures that you mentioned earlier are compassion, frugality, and humility. And those are, I had one interview where somebody kept asking me, and actually there were two, where people kept asking me about the role of love and what is love in Taoism. Taoist thinking Taoists can be, and generally are, in my experience, very, very passionate people. They are not coolly detached people. However, and so there can be, the ancestral Taoists were wild bacchanalian orgy revelers in the mountains having fun, and then going for weeks into a cave to meditate. So being balanced and discerning and disciplined does not mean having no passion. On the contrary, it means channeling that passion in ways that are good for your health and good for your community and good for the earth.
Let's talk about community. Okay.
Yes, love is compassion, right?
Yeah, of course.
And frugality and humility are rather self-explanatory. Yeah.
In the book, there's a section in the book where you talk about aging, the aging human, our grandparents and those that we know who are octogenarians, and how we have no time for them, and how we dismiss them because they're slow. We think they're slow-minded. They're physically slow, and I just wonder where all of this rush to just bypass those with wisdom comes from. Like in the Chinese culture, they do live with their parents and their grandparents, and they're happy to, and they respect them because they've been around a long time. They know a few things. And my dad's 94, and he's still the first phone call I make if I want to know something.
So your reference to the Chinese culture needs a little qualification, I fear.
Okay.
So what you're referring to is traditional Chinese culture, which was strongly Confucian, and that was actually a very effective way of cohering a culture that lasted 5,000 years. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't great for women, and there were some other constraints to it. And in fact, it was in response to its rigidity that Taoism began to flourish thousands of years ago. So none of that exists in China anymore, right? So we have exported materialism and our mad frenzy to China now, and they're just trying to be us but better with a Chinese flavor, and to become the biggest economy and the dominant military superpower, which they will soon do, because if you are any student of history, you know that for thousands of years, China was the center of the world culturally, militarily, and scientifically, and all that. And America is a tiny little pipsqueak of a nation when it comes to its longevity and its history. A couple of hundred years is nothing compared to thousands. And China was on top for most of that time. The time during which China has been sort of second fiddle has happened a few times in Chinese culture, and they always come back as they're doing now. Regarding speed and aging and community, let me say, I'm trying to melt them together and hit them all for you. So anything worth doing is worth doing slowly. We know how it ends. We may not know where it ends and when it ends. That's part of what makes life interesting. But we know how it ends. We die. Mm-hmm. So since we die, and since we become old and unable to do things and physically at the end, what is the rush exactly? I think this is, I'm driving around in traffic and I see people angling for a spot in the flow of traffic. And I think, wow, for that risk-taking behavior, which almost forced another car off the road or caused an accident and killed a family, they might, if they're lucky, arrive 20 seconds earlier at their destination. And who cares? Well, where's everybody going in such a hurry? It's the same disease of character that we see in consumption. It's the same urge to eat something and excrete it. It's the same urge, I want to get ahead in the traffic flow. I want to be up there, not here. I don't want to just sit quietly in my car and go with the flow peacefully without emotional rush. I get bored if I do that. I need titillation. I'm constantly in need of some kind of thing. And the little bit of danger that is involved in changing lanes aggressively, that little spike of adrenaline, well, you know what, our culture addicts me to that. So the elderly in Confucian culture were, as you say, seen as fountains of wisdom and sources of information, as well they should be. And this business of being slow mentally as we age, it turns out that absent disease states, but just in the normal course of aging, what this really reflects is not a slowing down of mental processes inside the brain, but rather something completely different. What it shows is that instead of having one wire, two little pieces connected between my tennis racket and the ball, right? There are now, as we age, thousands of connections, so that when we see that tennis ball coming at us, we might very well have a memory of a previous tennis game. Or maybe this color of this tennis ball evokes a lover's eyes. Or maybe the clouds and the day in which we're playing, the weather brings back a memory or something else. So we're thinking about ideas and memories all the time. Our experience and our processing is much richer when we're older, not slower and stupider.
And partly due to that servometer that's in our brain that recognizes the patterns.
Yes.
For those who want to go read about that, you can.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So how do we change ourselves? Because we have to change ourselves to start changing the world. And the first thing you mentioned is breathe. We don't breathe. We don't know how to breathe. We don't breathe. We don't relax. We're just too all the time. So let's breathe.
So if we're talking about breathing, let's talk about meditation for a minute. We do know how to breathe when we're born. We just forget. And we do know how to concentrate when we're babies. We just forget.
We know how to be nice to people too, but we forget.
Sometimes I'm not sure that maybe. I mean, I think babies know how to get what they want through manipulation of their adorableness.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not sure. I mean, children can be very cruel. I think, things are getting along with people is something like when we talked about aging, this is something we learn. But let's talk about meditation for a moment because it connects with breathing. We all understand what it is to exercise the physical body. And if somebody says, well, I hate to exercise. My dad was one of these people. He's a famous physician, but he never used his body at all. And he's, I hate to exercise. And I say, really? There's nothing, you just like to sit all the time? Well, I love to play ping pong. I mean, oh, you love to play ping pong? Perfect. Play ping pong every day for an hour. But you know what? Set up your ping pong table in the garage where you got room around it and get good at it and stand 5 feet back from the table and smash and duck and run and play with people who are really good and get out of breath when you're playing it. That's exercise. It doesn't have to be jogging.
Sure.
So there are a zillion ways to use our body. We can take our dogs for a brisk walk. We can climb mountains. We can climb rocks. We can go swimming. We can go in the ocean. We can go in the pool. We can do, isometrics in front of the television following some program, and on and on and on. There are just more ways than I can possibly identify to exercise the body. And in that panoply of choices is something for everybody. And so too it is with exercising the mind. There are many, many forms of meditation, which is simply a word that means exercising your mind. And there are meditative traditions in every religious and many secular cultures. And one of the most common and pervasive forms of meditation is to simply pay attention to your breath. So you see this little jazz I just played to come back to the theme, right?
Very good.
So the breath is the one thing that is always there. If we're not breathing, we got bigger problems than whether we're meditating or not. How do you feel about meditation? We don't breathe. We got a bigger issue. Right?
Watch the canary.
You got the heartbeat and you got the breath. And if you miss one of those, this is non-negotiable, right? Those two, you have to have them. So, paying attention to your breath is useful because your breath is always with you. And there is an enormous richness in the changes of your breath. There is much to look at there. It's not just in and out, in and out. There's a great deal of difference between using the abdomen to breathe, using the small of your back or your kidneys to breathe. There are all kinds of interesting techniques in Taoist practice to manipulate the breath and get more out of it. But the point is, just watching the breath reveals a great deal about your state of mind. And it's a very rich country in which to take a vacation.
I like that. I know, man, there's so much to talk about and so little time at the moment, really. But the one big thought that you bring up is that it's imperative that we leave Abrahamic religion, that we need to move away from that because it separates us. These, and it's very clear right now today that, between the Democrats and the Republicans, I don't even live in your country, and we all know what's going on in your country, that they have taken an ideal and turned it into the person and say, I hate you. Now, you're my enemy. You're my brother, but you're my enemy because you think you like this one and I like red and you like blue. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right. So I want to clarify my position on something that you just attributed to me, which I want to qualify and make clear. I don't believe that we all have to abandon the Abrahamic faiths. I do believe that the Abrahamic faiths provide succor and community for billions of people around the planet. And I'm not suggesting, I wouldn't be so bold as to suggest we have to leave them behind.
I misread.
What I do feel, but you're right in that I bring them up in a critical fashion. What I do feel is that we have to address fundamentalism in every stripe. Fundamentalism, by the way, exists in every culture. There might be people who accuse me of being a Taoist fundamentalist. Of course, they haven't met my teachers. but what I'm getting at is that there are elements to the Abrahamic faiths which were of political importance and usefulness thousands of years ago, but which do not serve us any longer in today's world, either as individuals or as communities. And the prime one, or a couple that I address in Monk Manifesto, are one, of course, intolerance and the idea that it's my way or the highway. Exactly what I'm saying not to do here, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly what I'm saying I don't do when I say Taoist ideas are important, but that doesn't mean you have to become a Taoist monk. You can be a rabbi, or you can be an observant Catholic or whatever you want. That's not the point. The point is.
But is Taoism a faith? Or is it a way of life?
So
Okay.
I'll get to that in a second. Just remember that inside these Abrahamic traditions are some of the fundamental tenets that have gotten us in the problems, into the pickle in which we find ourselves. And for those who would argue that it isn't the faiths that do it, but it's the defects and proclivities of human nature, I would say, okay, insofar as these religions and their gods are all human creations, I can't argue that point. But we want to address them in the way they manifest. So the idea that, for example, the world is our sandbox and our toilet, and all other sentient beings are beneath us in some imagined hierarchy, less important, and they're only as resources for our pleasure, meaning we eat them or we kill them for sport or whatever. These ideas are very rich and firmly embedded in the Abrahamic faiths, and which were, by the way, originally animal sacrifice traditions before they became coherent in the way we know them now. So that it's time for all that to go away. Right? That doesn't mean that you can't be a Jewish person or an observant Christian or an observant Muslim anymore. It means that those things that are destroying our world and causing us to kill each other need to go. Right? That's what I want.
Well, 2,000 years are still at it, so.
That's right. And as far as Taoism being, and people who say that religious wars were about territory, not about faith, were probably not present during the Crusades when swords were thrust down the throats of the heathens. So were those wars really about the land that people wanted? I wouldn't argue the point. Sometimes, religion and territory go together, and community. That's what you're asking me about. Regarding Taoism being a faith or a philosophy, the answer is yes. So just like Buddhism, some people view Taoism just like they do Buddhism. Some people view Taoism as a philosophy, some people view it as a religion. It manifests on planet Earth as both things, and separating them and teasing them out is an academic conceit, but not really all that useful. It did begin as a way, just think of it as a way of observing nature and following nature's lessons, and you'll be okay.
We're almost out of time, and I feel really sorry for that. But if there's one takeaway from the book, if there's one thing that, if you never pick up this book, folks, what do you want them to know?
Each of us has the power to change everything. Mm-hmm. And not alone, but by being the stone that is dropped into the pond. So, for example, let's take one really clear idea, veganism, right? So much maligned by the right. So if one person in your family, let's say it's you,
I've been vegan,
becomes vegan and decides, okay, I'm not going to contribute to unnecessary suffering in the world by eating animals that I do not need to kill and eat, because I can be perfectly healthier, in fact, by not doing that. So I'm just not going to do that anymore. Forget all the other things about veganism. Let's just focus on the suffering for a minute. Let's just say I don't want to contribute to suffering in the world if I don't have to, knowingly, wittingly, daily, right? It's not going to do that. So you decide to become vegan, and then you have a family gathering and people look at you and say, wow, Frankie, you don't want the turkey? Can I give you a little turkey? A little dead bird for you? You go, you know what, I think I'm just going to stay with this, with the stuffing over here and the cranberries and the string beans and the potatoes and whatever else. And then they all roll their eyes and make fun, and everybody dives in on the turkey, and maybe they got some meatballs too. And then next year, when the family reconvenes, there's Frankie, looking younger than she looked the year before, fit and happy and healthy, thinking clearly, with great skin and a great figure, and evidently thriving on this vegan diet. And then maybe, one or two of your relatives go, wow, I'd like to have as much energy as Frankie has. God, look at her jumping around, helping with the table, cleaning up, and doing everything. And I just want to sit here and float in my bloat. Yeah.
In my
So,
tryptophan.
so maybe my tryptophan, as well said. So maybe one other person in your family then thinks maybe I'll try the vegan thing. And this mechanism that I've just outlined, which is humorous and simplistic, is in fact exactly the way it goes. We set the example by our behavior. We make a decision, we stick to it, do something, and we're out to change. That's it. That's what the manifesto is all about.
But we need to speed it up, man, because we don't have a whole lot of time. You do talk about, the world that, we're coming to the sixth extinction, possibly. I mean,
we're in it. We're not coming to it.
Yeah, we're in it, and so it's. You think there's still time to save the planet or save humanity? I think you had an inkling, maybe when you wrote the book, maybe not now. I don't know. Where's your head at now?
I don't think any saving, is going on really. I think, sometimes we use terms like that because we don't have
other words,
better language for that. But, evolution is a much larger process than what is happening to human beings. The idea of Tao in Taoism is this sort of propulsive force or phenomenon that perfuses and suffuses everything. And in the river in which we all swim, and the river is moving. And so evolution is not something that is happening to human beings. Evolution is happening to all living things together. It is a much larger process. So, saving, what does saving mean? Human beings go extinct? Yes, so what? From the planet's point of view, probably a good thing. We have to correct the imbalance and take the cancer away from the planet so humans can't be here anymore. The planet doesn't care about that. There's no saving the planet. If we want to do these things, we may want to save us, right? And we may want to save other living creatures about whom we care and have affection for. But saving the planet doesn't need saving. We need saving.
What room do you keep your amphibians in?
Actually, behind the doors, the closet doors behind me are a bunch of turtles, and I have amphibians in a different room, and I'm trying to breed some endangered species that are, some of them are already extinct in the wild, and I belong to a group of people that tries to keep these things alive. So
I love that. I started to paint, this is my buffalo. I started painting a Canadian series of animals who were going extinct, trying to save them. So cool. We're in a similar place in time in our, but I'm not breeding turtles. You have 15 books, a couple fiction and nonfiction. Your website is Monk Yun Rou. You knew I was going to do that. .com. You can say it if you like, and make sure everybody gets it correctly.
www.monk Monk Yun Rou, YUN as in Nancy, ROU.com.
Yes. Yeah. Go there, visit it. You've got some really cool stuff. Silk Punk. I love that idea.
So I have a few novels in the pipeline now that are in that category, which is a blend of Asian fantasy and science fiction and philosophy and adventure.
You got the glasses, but
those few, I'm glad you noticed. Those few will be out. And a man in my condition, glasses are an accessory, and that is important. Yeah.
I love it. I hope that you'll come back one day, because this is fascinating. I've so enjoyed speaking to you. And if you're watching this show and you're going to listen to it later on, make sure that you go and get this book. It's a fascinating book, Mad Monk Manifesto. Grab it, and you can get it on Amazon. You get it in Kindle. You can get a hard copy of it. And then try some of the other books, because they're really fascinating. And Tai Chi, that's anybody can do it, like dragon boating.
That's a subject for a whole other show.
We'll do that. We'll do another show on Tai Chi. We got to go. Facebook, we love you. I will see you again next week. And thank you so much for being my guest today. Just so enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you. Back at you, Frankie. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And